Hello, and welcome to Module 7. We're going to be covering the interview process in the private sector. The hiring process in the private sector can be really daunting, and it involves multiple conversations with different points of contact, starting with job recruiters, hiring managers, through to subject matter experts, and even your future team members. In this module, we discuss what you can expect from start to finish so that you can best prepare yourself.
So, one of your first conversations will be with a job recruiter. Most companies utilize either in house recruiters or they contract with an agency to do the recruitment for them. Recruiters can often vary in their range of knowledge regarding UX and, in particular, UX research. So, more likely than not, they'll have no expertise in this area. As such, it's all the more important to really hit on your core skills so that they're almost embarrassingly transparent to the recruiter, first on your resume and then during your initial conversation with them, often referred to as the phone screen.
The first step in an interview process is catching the eye of a job recruiter. Of note, recruiters get a cut for each candidate they bring in that gets hired, so it is in their best interests to see that you're successful. This also means that you need to impress them first and foremost so that they feel confident that investing in you will pay off for them. There are multiple channels through which a job recruiter or hiring manager might come across your job application. The first of which is your actual job application. In actively applying to jobs, your resume or cover letter, if it's requested, will appear in a recruiter's database for their review. Some companies even store these job applications for upwards of a year, meaning that a job recruiter can pull your application for any future open roles that you might be suited for. You also might have received a referral or a recommendation. So, in the event that you know somebody or have worked for somebody in the company that you're currently trying to get hired at, you can have them be a point of contact and submit a referral on your behalf. This will bring you higher in the review queue for potential job candidates. LinkedIn talent pools. Recruiters may reach out to you irrespective of whether or not you actually applied for an open position at the company. Sometimes you were even rejected recently from the very same company that the recruiter is reaching out for. It is likely that they found you through LinkedIn and not their company's database, so it's best to be upfront and transparent with them in the event that you applied and were already rejected so that they know about this rather than just coming across it in their system when they're entering your data into the database. The last possibility is that a hiring manager tells a recruiter to get in touch with you. This kind of cherry picking is much less common, but it can occur, especially with startups, because they're really trying to set up a choice lineup of new employees to ensure their company's success. So, what are recruiters looking for when they speak to a job candidate? And how can you set yourself up for success in a 30-minute conversation to ensure you pass forward to the next round? Well, for starters, it's to some degree a crapshoot. Like mentioned above, assume until proven otherwise that the recruiter has little to no understanding of what UXR is. Use this to your advantage, though, and speak authoritatively. We can assure you they will be none the wiser and are going off of impressions more than anything else. A recruiter needs to walk away with a feeling, an actual feeling, of your authority, knowledge, experience, adaptability, and your general ability to perform in the private sector. Given recruiters' lack of deep UXR knowledge, the best thing you can do is just give them that impression they want by taking the reins and controlling the narrative. You can protect confidence by asking the job recruiter questions during your phone screen. Ask them about the role, the work culture, the type of research the team or the company is in need of, the benefits package, and professional growth opportunities at the company. This will show that you're familiar with the private sector and that you are judging if this is the right opportunity for you, not the other way around. This small power play instills in the recruiter a sense of your inherent value to the organization. All right, so let's imagine the following realistic conversation that might occur on a phone screen with a recruiter. I'll play the role of both the recruiter and the researcher and try to do a little bit of a different voice between the two of them. Recruiter, so what's your background and how do you see yourself contributing to this UXR team? Well, with a PhD in anthropology, I have extensive experience and training in conducting qualitative research, including methodological frameworks and analysis. I really want to find a team that's best able to leverage the skills that I have by allowing me to surface unknown unknowns, steer product strategy and vision, and inform concept. Given my skill set, I would best contribute to a team that allows for this type of interdisciplinary collaboration. Would I be afforded this opportunity at your company? I can take note of your question to pass on to the hiring manager to see if this is something the role offers. Wink, wink. You're forming images of futures with them. Great. I'd love to talk to them more about where they see someone such as myself contributing to the product and team. Given I'm not a traditional UX researcher, my skills really lend themselves best to vision setting and strategic product work. Of course, I'm not opposed to tactical research when and where it's needed. In this process of wowing the recruiters with your skills and capabilities, be prepared to touch on topics such as your education, specifically how it relates to the job ad description, research projects you've led and the methods involved, what research outputs look like, so reports, presentations, conference, etc., and collaborations with other stakeholders, especially cross-functional partners.
Depending on the company or the actual role that you're applying to, a hiring manager might be the next person that you talk with. If it isn't the hiring manager, then you might do a technical phone screen with someone who works in UX or an actual UX researcher. We'll cover technical phone screens next, but for now, let's talk about the hiring manager and how to navigate this conversation. We talked previously about wooing the recruiter by giving the impression of knowledge and authority, but this isn't going to work with the hiring manager. In conversation with the hiring manager, your goal shouldn't be to check all the boxes, but really to aim for a general overall match with their team needs. So that's to say, it's like mental calculus. So you might not have previous job experience in the private sector, but you can in fact speak confidently of working cross-functionally or having faced data collection problems and had to pivot your methodological approach to appropriately address a given issue. In a manager's mind, they may think, okay, so this candidate hasn't worked professionally in this space, but they do have past experience working effectively with non-researchers and have also faced and responded to technical or privacy-related challenges. Hiring managers will have a strong contextual understanding of the type of candidates they're looking for, the dynamics and the culture of the team, and be comparing you against these expectations or desires in order to determine whether you might be a good fit. This presents you with a great opportunity to ask many of the same questions back to the hiring manager regarding your skill set and professional growth opportunities. Let's talk at more length about the 4 areas the hiring manager will assess you on during your conversation. We'll be going through each of the following in more detail over the next several slides. These include how you'll be assessed across your skills, knowledge, and experience, your personality and your ability to communicate, whether or not you're up for the job, and how well you work with others. You'll need to come out of your interview with your hiring manager with a net positive across the following: your research skills, your research knowledge, and your work experience. And if you're applying to the job directly from academia, then you won't be bringing too much work experience to the table necessarily, so you really need to get your points of skills and knowledge. Practice ahead of time your code switching between academic lexicon and UXR speak, and for this you can refresh with Module 5 for some resources to really aid in this. So maybe your archival analysis becomes a literature review, a genealogy of modern day dairy practices becomes an understanding of how acquired mental models inform user behavior, and if you really get into a groove, perhaps that adaptation of Lacanian theory to expose the fracturing of King Lear's mirror, resulting in his failure to form an integrated self, could be considered a novel adaptation of an existing approach to data analysis to surface novel dynamics previously undiscovered. Another area that you'll be assessed on is your attitude and ability to communicate. It's It's not a complicated assessment, but really a matter of determining if you're a seemingly decent human being that can communicate thoughts and ideas clearly, and hopefully you are. So even if you identify as an introvert, bring as much charisma as you can muster to the interview and really work to insert a bit of humanity into your conversation. On this latter point, we have an easy to follow formula and some examples that you can use.
We call this easy to use formula for communication the rule of five. You can apply the rule of five to your conversation with a hiring manager, but it's also applicable to any number of time-bound introductory social interactions as well. For each hour, there should be an aggregated total of 15 minutes of chit-chat that is focused on establishing social connections across interlocutors. If you only have 30 minutes, then you should have about 7 minutes of conversational chit-chat to complete. You should split up the 15 minutes across the duration of your conversation. So if you have an hour, that's 5 minutes at the beginning, 5 in the middle, and 5 at the end. In the first 5 minutes of your conversation, relate to the person something personal that is also universally relatable. So that means don't talk about politics, religion, or tragedy. Often this will be the weather. Sometimes it might be circumstantial, such as, oh, the dogs are acting up in the background today. Apologies if you can hear them. You might say something about the full moon, or even something in the distance. You can just totally make it up and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, they're doing construction outside in the building across the street." One approach that you can take that I definitely use a lot of the time is self-deprecation. This often renders you immediately disarming and relatable, somebody that's easy to open up to. So consider something like the following. Okay, so I'm going to do voice acting again. Hiring manager, how are you today? Oh, probably a 3 out of 5 on the Likert scale. This is a great UXR joke, wink, wink. So call that a good day nowadays. But honestly, I'm a bit leery of anyone that might claim that they're a 5. How are you doing? Oh gosh, yeah, I'd have to say I'm a 3 as well. Maybe a 4? It really depends on whether or not I read the news. Again, midway through, insert another moment of humor to really bring a bit of that humanizing element to the conversation. For example, you can feign momentary distraction. Oh, sorry, I hear a siren going off. I think there might be an ambulance driving by. Oh, nope, somebody's car alarm. Sorry about that. So that's a great example. It doesn't matter if it's actually audible to your interlocutor. It's really about having that momentary disruption where you can be just a normal person and break apart an otherwise agenda heavy and rigid conversation into something that brings two people together. And finally, at the end of the conversation, you spend another 5 minutes to bond with your partner regarding something personal. The ideal would be for you to refer to something that you've already bonded over earlier in the conversation. This reinforces that personal connection that you had with them earlier and leaves this feeling of fondness and meaningfulness to your conversation that will linger in their mind even after you've talked. So consider, for example, the following. Well, that's all the questions that I have for you today. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. Oh, yeah, I had a really wonderful time, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the team says and whether or not I might have a chance to meet them. I hope that your day improves from a 3 to at least a 4, but hopefully not a 5. Don't actually wink, though.
In addition to the areas that we've discussed already, the hiring manager will want to determine if you're up for the job and that you have a history of working well with others. Being up for the job essentially amounts to whether or not you appear sufficiently stoked about taking on a new challenge. The hiring manager will likely have an ideal level of excitement for the job they hope the candidate will demonstrate. So be sure to really emphasize multiple times that at this point in your career, you've surmounted the first challenges that you set your sights on, like a master's or a PhD, and now you're really looking for a new type of challenge that will build on new skills and require you to adapt and apply your existing experience to new and ambiguous problem spaces. UXers really love the idea of being a lifelong student, ever curious and always looking to learn and challenge oneself. including assumptions and expectations. Finally, hiring managers will have some anxiety that you, being an academic or former academic, don't work well with others and that you're more of a lone wolf type. While this might seem like a stereotype, there are enough instances where this is actually proven true, and you really need to assuage these fears. So you can ham it up by mentioning how during grad school you were always seeking out opportunities to share knowledge and likewise learn from others. You can talk about how you believe learning from others and sharing knowledge are the best way to ensure success. You might also talk about how, through your academic work, you lean on and leverage the knowledge and skills of others, and without that, your work wouldn't be possible.
Probably not a surprise at this point, but a job interview process will differ place to place and even role to role. After the conversation with the recruiter, you might find that you're not speaking with the hiring manager, but instead a UX professional. A conversation with a subject matter expert in the same job role or job area that you're entering into is referred to as a phone screen or technical screen. After your conversation with the job recruiter, you'll either meet with a hiring manager or a UX professional for the phone screen. It's really unlikely for you to be interviewing with both. The phone screen is a lot harder than a conversation with a hiring manager and a heck of a lot harder than the conversation with the recruiter. This is because the person running the phone screen will be equipped with a scenario or challenge that they'll ask you to address on the phone on your feet in real time. They'll also have the domain expertise to snuff out bullshit. Their role is to suss out whether or not you have the skill sets, the experience, and business savvy required for the position and the company. In your technical phone screen, the interviewer will outline a hypothetical scenario and ask that you design a research plan that addresses that scenario and the objective they've just described. They'll want to hear your research design process, how you're thinking through that process and the problem, what are the variables you're considering, and be sure that across this, you explain the logic that you're applying at each step of the research design. Talk through the advantages and disadvantages of certain methods. While you won't know exactly what the hypothetical scenario is ahead of time, you can come prepared or as prepared as possible by sketching out the bare bones of a generic research plan. So this would include things such as objectives, methods, scope, participants, timeline, stakeholders, etc. This will help you to begin to frame out your research plan and ensure that you're hitting on all the key phases. Additionally, be sure to ask clarifying questions or apply your own imagination, articulating it clearly to them to help scope down the research problem into possible research designs and scenarios. Finally, make sure that you mention across all stages of your research that you'll be working closely and collaboratively with your product stakeholders and fellow UXers, so that includes designers and writers. It is incredibly important to scope the research questions with these partners in mind and ensure that the deliverables you're delivering and scoping have your audience in mind. Another possibility is that the phone screener will ask you about prior experience in the lens of, tell me about a time when, namely a time when you faced difficulty, such as a difficult research problem, or you needed to pivot your approach because of an unforeseen barrier or blocker, or maybe you faced a difficult circumstance with your stakeholders disagreeing or being uncooperative. The same recommendation of walking through your logic in designing and executing the research applies as the example given prior.
More and more, companies are adopting what's called the interview loop, or just the loop, as their preferred method for job interviews. This tends to involve an all-day series of 45 to 60-minute interviews with different members of the hiring team or with existing professionals for the type of role you'll be entering into. For example, you might interview with the director of the organization, your potential manager, the PM of the team leading the product space you'll be joining, a UX designer, and an engineer from the team. It might also consist entirely of UX researchers and UX research managers. So ask ahead of time who will be part of your loop so that you can get an idea of how much you'll have to foreground common UX research knowledge if your audience includes non-specialists. The level of structure you encounter in these interviews will again vary according to the organizational maturity of the company you're applying to. In fact, it's actually a good barometer for the organizational maturity of that company overall. Think about if they can't get their act together to efficiently interview job candidates, then it takes little imagination to anticipate the condition of their HR department, their onboarding process, performance assessment systems, and management culture. In our experience, it's a pretty accurate gauge for what you'll encounter when actually working at that company. Returning once more to the interview loop, typically there'll be some, however loosely formed, rubric of professional and soft skills they'll be looking for in a job candidate. They'll refer to the combination of these characteristics in the jargon of making sure it's the right fit between you and the position. They might also use this expression if they reject you, not the right fit. In many ways, these individual conversations are just expansions of the key categories assessed with the hiring manager or phone screen. These professional and soft skills assessed in your interview loop can loosely be organized into the following buckets: presentation skills and storytelling, technical skills, role knowledge, and leadership. In what follows, we'll go into more depth for each of these components assessed in the interview loop.
Prior to the series of one-on-one interviews with your panel, you'll be asked to give a presentation on past research you've conducted. You'll have approximately 45 minutes allocated for your presentation, with 30 to 40 of those minutes being your presentation and the remainder being question and answers from the panel audience. This presentation is highly structured, and often the recruiter or hiring manager will provide you with some broad outline of the areas to touch upon. Regardless, the following provides broad strokes of the type of content to include in your UXR loop presentation. Spend approximately 1 minute introducing yourself by providing information about your post-bachelor's education, relevant job history, current location, hobbies, and something silly to make a bit more personable. People do love pets, so that's always a safe fallback. Then move into your presentation agenda. This should also take approximately 1 minute. Have on your slide minimal information, bullets that outline the presentation sections. As you present this slide, your voiceover would go something like this. Today, I'll be talking about research I conducted for my doctoral thesis. I'll begin with some background about the problem space and then proceed to describe the methods I utilized to surface relevant findings that I then shaped into recommended solutions taken up by policyholders in Guadalajara. Ask the attendees to hold their questions to the end, as you will be leaving approximately 5 to 10 minutes for discussion. After your presentation of agenda, you should move into the background section. Allocate approximately 5 minutes to this. Describe relevant background information to build basic contextual understanding of the problem state that you faced. What is particularly enticing about the problem space? For example, is there little known about it, no prior research or historical data, or maybe new information has come to light that you helped to surface? This section is about explaining the problem statement of your research. Spend another 5 minutes on study design and methodology. Given the problem space and objectives of your work, what research approach did you decide to take and why? What methods do you use? Did you use a mixture of literature review and archival research, participant observation, interviews, or trends analysis? You'll have another 5 minutes to dedicate to challenges. What are some challenges or difficulties you encountered in your research? The emphasis here should be on how you creatively drove a solution or pivoted your research plan to successfully circumvent some roadblocks that emerged. If you don't have any challenges that you have to cover, then skip this section, but spend more time in another section like study design and methods, or following sections such as insights and significance. Be prepared to spend approximately 5 minutes on analysis. Here you want to talk about the analytical techniques or methodology that you applied. This might include such things as heuristic frameworks, coding interviews to identify common trends or patterns, and deep analysis, looking into systems of value and cultural beliefs. Remember to code switch as often as possible between any academically inclined analytical approaches into the nearest neighbor UXR methodologies. Use creative license in that translation when and where needed. Moving into the final two sections, we have insights and significance. Plan to spend another 5 minutes here. What did you discover? Why are these insights significant? That is, do they problematize any preconceived notions, throw into question a predominant system or practice, or give voice to something that otherwise remains silenced? Your final section before you move into discussion and question and answer is results and recommendations. You should still have about 5 minutes to dedicate to this and have leftover 10 for the discussion and questions. Your results and recommendations will speak to what change your work has caused. This could be anything from challenging assumptions, changing perceptions, to material or processual transformations in the solution to a problem. If your results and recommendations persist primarily in academic circles, which is most likely if you're coming out of grad school or recently emerging from a professorship, then try to speak as much as you can to how your research has contributed to thought leadership and knowledge production. There are a few areas that academics should specifically address during panel presentations and in your Loop one-on-one interviews. In our experience, industry folks tend to assume that the creativity and fast pace of the business world is unimaginable and beyond the experiential reach of academics. So be sure to talk up your competence and experience in these areas during your loop by verbalizing them and building them into your presentation deck. So, for example, 1, talk about working with certain time constraints or timelines for executing work. It might be useful to break your academic work down into phases so it doesn't seem like a monolithic block of graduate studies. For example, you can talk about qualifying exams requiring you to synthesize large bodies of work written by the foremost historical and modern day thinkers on the subject of science and technology in Japan, and perceptions of time to deliver 3 comprehensive papers for peer review and approval. Oh, this isn't related to me, by the way. Make clear your ability to adapt to all kinds of unforeseen issues throughout the entire course of research study and your ability to successfully change course and turn a less than ideal situation into gold. And third, following on the heels of adaptability, you need to show that you can get creative in research design, methods, recruiting, and dissemination of results. Apparently, it's not enough to have 10 years of research training and on-the-ground experience. You also have to show that you have Jimi Hendrix level creativity and innovativeness as a researcher too.
So moving now into your one-on-ones with your loop panel, expect that each member will individually or collectively be assessing you in 4 core areas: technical skills, role knowledge, leadership, and impact. These areas will be familiar as we've already touched on them when we were talking about the hiring manager and technical screening conversations. And this repetition is also known to the team running the interviews, so looking across all your conversations, you want to paint a consistent and robust story of yourself. Let's talk first about technical skills and what your interviewers will be looking for. Technical skills include the range of methods and techniques with which you're familiar, have training in or experience with, and competence in performing. This includes your ability to select from any number of techniques and the method best suited for the problem given the constraints at hand. Interviewers will want to understand your logic, walking them through your thought process for selecting one approach over another, while weighing all the relevant variables you can think of out loud for them to hear. In technical skill assessments, you might get hypothetical problems given to you to think out loud and reason through to arrive at some sort of conclusion. Questions asked for eliciting technical skills might look something like the following. Tell me about your favorite research method and explain a little bit about why it's your favorite. Now tell me about a time when this method proved to be insufficient in answering a research question and what you did instead. Another example might be, what research methods are you most skilled at and what are some that you'd like to develop? Another potential question might look like, imagine a VP from your company comes to you and tells you to conduct some research to identify emerging trends in augmented reality technologies to help the company strategize a competitive advantage. You have 6 months to execute the entirety of the study. Tell me where you'd start and why.
Moving on now to role knowledge. This refers to your awareness and understanding of what is entailed in working as a UX researcher. As you likely will not be entering into the private sector with prior work history, either in the private sector or in UX research, you'll need to focus on past research experience and project management strategies or approaches taken to deliver research insights in a timely and effective way. Some examples of questions you might receive in your interview loop that specifically ask for information about your role knowledge are as follows. And again, I'm going to be doing a little voice acting with this one. Tell me about a time when your stakeholders did not agree with your research findings. How did you deal with this situation? What was the result? Sure. When I initially shared my research findings with a panel of subject matter experts, your dissertation committee, wink, wink, there was some disagreement about the applicability and significance of my findings to the relative problem domains it was intended to speak to. Rather than pursue the discussion further in that group setting, I decided to set up individual meetings with each stakeholder to get their feedback one-on-one regarding what they felt to be missing or lacking in the research findings. With this approach, I was able to identify a common misunderstanding resulting from the specific framework that I applied that conflicted with my stakeholders' priorities. I revised my research report to explicitly address why I applied the framework and how it actually adds to, in value, the priorities of my stakeholders rather than conflicts with it. As you can see in the response given, it's very squarely grounded in the world of academia and your academic experience. Even the way that you're referring to your dissertation committee is as subject matter experts as well as stakeholders. All of it is true. It's just engaging in that really all important code switching from academia to UX to render it relevant to the questions being asked. All right, let's move into another example of a question you might receive about your role knowledge. It's really likely that you'll get some form of question that's very heavily indexing on UX specific knowledge and information, as well as private sector organizational bureaucracy. Don't be disarmed. You can answer this. It's just a matter of doing that code switching again. So, an example might include the following. There are a number of organizational structures that a UX team can take within a company, including centralized and decentralized. All UX professions may be grouped together in an umbrella organization of UX or broken up into separate teams according to their subdisciplines. Tell me about your experience with these different organizational structures and what worked or didn't work, including your preference. Okay, so you definitely don't know about UX and private sector organizational structures, but you do know a thing or two about disciplinary silos, conflicting schools of thought, and even how to appease a finicky academic rock star. If you get a UX or private sector heavy interview question, do some mental gymnastics to identify the core dynamics the question is asking about and find a parallel scenario from your academic work and work experience that speaks to it. Even in academia, we know a thing or two about how hard it is to foster cross-functional communication and collaboration, as well as the impact that this type of collaboration can have in terms of bringing about some interdisciplinary, cross-pollination, creative and transformative modes of thinking.
The final area of focus in your loop interviews will be about your ability to take on leadership and ownership over project work. You should hit on two facets here. One has to do with taking on a leadership position of directing others towards a common goal. That is, identifying a problem, outlining a solution, and then galvanizing others around it towards completion. The other aspect of this is to hit on is collaboration, recognizing others for their subject matter expertise, delegating areas of ownership, and letting these experts drive their areas of ownership through to completion. And always talk about the cross-functional partners you engaged with during this work.
Impact. There's a lot of different sizes and shapes for impact. So let's consider the core four. 1. Did you identify something previously unknown or perhaps overlooked by prior researchers? 2. Did you successfully change stakeholder assumptions or perceptions? For example, before my research, my stakeholders believed that everybody loved black licorice, but after my research, we learned that only 10% of people do. 3. Did you establish a baseline or metric where none existed prior? And lastly, 4. Did you author or engage in thought leadership by, say, publishing a paper or giving a presentation? An element of impact is your business acumen. That is, how you went about achieving this change and convincing others to agree to it. Your interviewers will want to learn more about how you obtained your impact. What was your strategy? Did you innovate a new approach to sharing research insights? Perhaps you finally figured out how to use interpretive dancing. Perhaps you tailored your research findings to your target audience, ensuring that you used the language and jargon that they were most comfortable with to ensure that they heard and understood your findings.
While not strictly a category you're assessed on, your attitude and general demeanor will be something people implicitly or explicitly call out when it comes to fit. So try to be relatable. Use the techniques described above in the Rule of Five around small talk or human universally relatable topics, like the weather, how tired you are, the day of the week, or something random but comical. Speak about the future in a way that suggests you want this opportunity because it'll be a chance for career growth, new challenges, learning, and new collaborations. You could say something like, oh, I've never gotten the chance to work in a truly mixed methods research environment, and I can't wait to work with quantitative researchers and data scientists. Be sure to ask questions back as well. You could even turn some questions around on your interviewer, saying things like, have you ever encountered pushback from product teams about your research findings at company X?
Following your interviews, it will be approximately a week to 10 business days before you hear back about their decision. A lot will depend on people getting their notes together and then submitting it into their hiring portal or tool, and then for all those that did the interviews to get together and discuss the candidate. If you are not selected, you'll hear back from the recruiter. Sometimes it will be by phone, but usually it's a canned email that will state something along the lines of, the team really enjoyed meeting you. It was a difficult decision, but ultimately we felt that it isn't the right fit. You can follow up and try to ask questions or ask for more information about why exactly you were rejected. Maybe you can request any feedback about what you could do differently to improve your interviewing in the future. Most likely, they're going to ghost you. And learning from rejection, or if you're fortunate, negotiating the terms of your offer, are what we turn to in the next module.
All right, congratulations on completing Module 7. That was a lot of information and a lot to digest. But let's do a quick recap. So we started out talking about interactions with recruiters. Remember that recruiters generally have very minimal technical UX research knowledge, so this is a great time to really impress them by making your experience and your skill set readily apparent to them. Bear in mind that recruiters have a financial incentive to get you hired, so they really want to see you be successful. In this module, we talked about how when speaking with a recruiter, jump right in and take the reins of the conversation and speak with authority so that you make a really strong impression on them and give them a good feeling about your level of expertise. And don't forget to ask thoughtful questions to them about the role, the culture, opportunities for growth, etc. During your phone calls with recruiters, be ready to talk about things like your education, research projects you've done and the methods involved, the output of those projects and their impact, as well as collaboration during those projects. We also covered talking to a hiring manager, how you won't be able to fake it as much with them, and you'll really have to hit on your skill set and convey your personality, while also being sure to reply with thoughtful questions. In this module, we also address how to prepare yourself for the technical phone screen by having a general outline ready. And come prepared to think on your feet about designing a research project and talking through the advantages and disadvantages of various approaches and what kind of clarifying questions you might want to ask about this hypothetical research scenario to the interviewer as they lay out this scenario for you. In this module, we also prepared you for the loop presentation. So during this presentation, you'll have to introduce yourself, offer an agenda, the background to your project, discuss the study itself and the design and the methods involved, then discuss the challenges, followed by the analysis, then insights and significance, concluding with results and recommendation, and of course reflection if you have time. If that weren't enough, to assuage concerns that interviewers may have about hiring an academic, also be sure to really hit on how you've addressed time constraints and difficult timelines in your past, your ability to adapt to unforeseen issues, and really show that you can get creative with research design and think outside the box. Lastly, make sure to focus on conveying your technical skills, your role knowledge, your leadership, your experience, and impact, as these will be the main areas on which you are assessed overall. Alright, that's admittedly a massive amount of information to try to assimilate and process all at once. But don't worry, your interviews will happen step at a time, with each component building and improving upon the last part. And you'll get more confident and comfortable discussing these things as you start to land more interviews and move further along in the process. And as always, be sure to check out the module course notes for additional resources that'll help you confidently take on this final and most challenging stage of the job search.